Evening, everyone. The time is now 6:17 and we're going to get started. My name is Carmen Trujillo. I'd like to call our regular board session to order. Let's see. Ms. Miriam, can we have a roll call this next?
Yes, Madam Chair, that's item number 2.
Yes. Carmen Trujillo,
Here.
Jessica Bueno,
Here.
Reggie Carrillo,
Here.
Dr. Alicia Dink.
Here. All right. Having 4 of us here, we do have a quorum. So I just want to thank everyone for participating and coming to our meeting this evening. And just a reminder to the board to speak your names before speaking. That way our online audience can follow the meeting along. Let's see. Oh, and this is a study session, so we're here to learn more about specific topics. No decisions will be made. Ms. Jeffries, can we please have the Pledge of Allegiance?
I'm subbing for Ms. Jeffries today. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. Let's see. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I would like to amend the agenda to item number 6, coming before number 5. So we'll hear from the government property lease exercise tax, followed by family and community engagement.
Do I have a second?
Alicia Vink, I'll second.
Thank you. Ms. Miriam, can we have a roll call again for a vote?
Yes. Carmen Trujillo,
Yes.
Jessica Bueno,
Yes.
Reggie Carrillo,
Yes.
Dr. Alicia Dink.
Yes.
With 4 of those being in favor, the motion carries. And we will move on to our presenters.
Provide the board an update regarding the government property lease excise tax, which we call GPLETs. And we're going to have a discussion from the City of Phoenix folks that are going to be discussing the topic at an overall level. And also, I'm going to come second with a presentation more at a local district level about the process that we follow to put this GPLETs in place. So with that, we're going to have Ms. Christine Mackey from the City of Phoenix that's going to present the first part of the agenda.
Good evening. Good evening, Vice President and members of the board. Thank you so much for having us here today. Excited to talk to you about all that's going on in Phoenix, but giving you an overview of GPLET and how it's used and what it is. Dr. Weeks thought that might be helpful for some of the new board members that don't have a background in GPLET. So by way of introduction, I'm Chris Mackey. I'm the Director of Community and Economic Development for the City of Phoenix. With me today is Joseph McCune, Project Manager of Community Development. Joseph, can you wave? And Zandon Keating, Deputy Director of Community and Economic Development. Zandon, thank you. So what I thought I'd talk about just over maybe 15 minutes is give you an overview of Giplet, an overview of what's going on in downtown, and then follow up after the next presenter with any questions you might have. So as an overview of Giplet, it is a statutory program. So some people say Gplet, some people say Giplet, tomato, tomato. It's the same thing. I say Giplet. So it is a government property lease excise tax, and it was put in place in 1996 by the state legislature as a way to cause properties that exist on businesses or development that exists on city-owned property to pay property tax. As you know from being in school districts, cities don't pay property tax for any tenants that are on their property. So as an example, let me give you Sky Harbor Airport. Sky Harbor Airport is owned by the city of Phoenix. And if I'm a private sector tenant that's on Sky Harbor, I technically don't pay property tax because the city doesn't pay property tax. Giplet causes that excise tax to be paid by the private owners that are on city-owned property. If I'm at the convention center, same thing, I'm a concessionaire, I pay something into an excise tax that goes into distribution by the county assessor through pass-through of property tax. Without the excise tax that's caused by Giplet on this, property tax would be zero. And that's what was happening prior to 1996 when the Giplet statute was authorized. So in 1996, the Giplet statute was authorized. In 2010, the program was modified by the legislature to shorten any term of a Giplet to not greater than 25 years. So the program does allow for an 8-year abatement of property tax. Pre-2010, there was not a limit on the time that a Giplet could take place for. So you could have an 8-year abatement, and then you could pay your excise tax for however long of the term of the agreement was. In 2010, that was modified to have a max of 25 years. So 8-year abatement of property tax. And then you would have years 9 through 25, you would pay an excise tax that was set by the program with the legislature that was increased by producer price index and was different for each discipline. So it was by square foot for multifamily, by square foot for office, by square foot for retail, and each one has a different rate. And that rate is posted on Department of Revenue's website. So it's an easy thing to track. In 2016, it was again modified to only allow for an 8-year abatement or 25 years of excise tax, but not both. And so it really came into in these areas of an 8-year abatement or 25 years. And that's where we sit today. No modifications have taken place since 2016. So this is in lieu of ad valorem property tax that you pay through the county assessor. Instead, you now have an excise tax that you pay based on square footage of your development of your property. But for 8 years, you can have an abatement if that's agreed to. So there's 2 ways that Giplet is used. And that is, as we talked about, the tax on non-governmental properties, which we've already talked about, Sky Harbor or the Convention Center, and then as an economic development redevelopment tool. So we've used it to, and other cities across the state have used it to cause revitalization to happen in challenged areas. So if you look across the country, 49 states have a redevelopment tool called tax increment financing, or TIF. TIF is illegal in Arizona. And so Giplet is used in lieu of TIF in Arizona. What it allows is those challenges that we have for development in a dense urban environment or redevelopment area where it's not, so you think about it when you go out to develop something, and I'm going to build 300 high density residential units in the middle of what used to be a farm in Chandler, Buckeye, or Phoenix, in an area on 18 acres. I've got lots of room to work. The development gets built and away we go. You surface park, everything's wonderful. When you are building in a redevelopment area, you're dealing with all kinds of unknowns. You're dealing with environmental issues, you're dealing with historic issues, and you're dealing with prehistoric issues. And what I mean by those, environmental, it's contamination of the soil or unstable soil. In historic issues, it could be, as we found on several of our buildings, there were old parking garages that were under the ground from the 1920s. The very first parking garage in Phoenix was recently demolished. Underground, it had all kinds of chemicals in bags in the walls that nobody knew what they were. Prehistoric, so where downtown Phoenix is, it was also the Hohokum's downtown. And so it's so fascinating when you start to develop in these areas where you dig in the dirt and you find remnants of the Hokum village, you find, pottery, you find residences, you find these things. And so the development community calls in Arizona State University and the tribal nations to be able to do what they need to do with these very sacred things that they do find in this area, which causes additional expense to development. But also, as part of the citizen voted on general plan, the area that they've called for dense urban development is in downtown Phoenix. So the concept of the general plan for downtown Phoenix isn't 300 units on 18 acres, it's 300 units on 14,000 square feet. So 2 residential lots holds the same as a big suburban type of surface park development. So a suburban surface park development will be about $150 a square foot to build, about $5,000 a stall for surface parking. When you look at what is called type 1A construction, which means it's steel and concrete, they're reinforced, you have life safety systems, you have fire systems, they're elevator served. So you're typically above 11 stories, but most of it we've done have been above 20 stories. You're dealing at about $400 a square foot for construction, and you're dealing with anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000 per stall in parking. So subterranean's about $50,000 and $25,000 above grade in creating a parking structure. So to cause people to want to live back in the central city, to make it attainable, and that's a poor choice of words because it's very expensive to live in the central city, but we'll talk about the jobs that are there and why that's the way that it is. To level the playing field, let's put it that way, between an 18-acre greenfield site and a very dense urban development site in downtown Phoenix, the GIPLET is used with that 8-year abatement, whether it's Tempe, whether it's Goodyear, whether it's Chandler, whether it's Phoenix. This is a tool that has been used and used successfully to talk through some of the redevelopment that we've seen in the past. The GIPLET can also be used, can be used in 2 different areas. So first, it has to be a redevelopment area. So it can be used anywhere in the state, but it's not financially beneficial to use anywhere in the state. To take advantage of the tool, it's got to be a redevelopment area, and to have an abatement of the property tax, it has to be in both a redevelopment area and a central business district. There's only one place in Phoenix that is a redevelopment area and a central business district, and this school district is the school district that serves that area, and that is downtown Phoenix. The central business district was created in the 1980s. The redevelopment area was created in 1979 and reaffirmed by City Council in 2020. So if the tool that we use that is in a central business district and a redevelopment area has to improve the value of the development by at least 100%, the city provides a notification to all taxing jurisdictions of not less than 60 days that we're going to consider a GIPLET at a city council meeting, subject to city council approval. If city council approves that item, the city may abate the excise tax on those properties for up to 8 years. And what we've used it for is to really cause that changing market focus. So as you all know, being the school board members and certainly the members of the staff that's here, the height of the population in downtown Phoenix existed really in the 1970s. We saw a mass exodus in the 1970s of the population in downtown Phoenix to the suburbs. The suburbs got malls, they got freeways, they got buildings, they got master plan subdivisions, and a great number of people left the downtown Phoenix area to go live in the suburbs. In fact, we didn't reach the population of 1970 back in downtown Phoenix until 2016. And the GIPLET tool was part of causing that redevelopment of downtown Phoenix. And we're now seeing even more people wanting to live in this area. You know, as the economy changes, as the market focus changes and others change, we see that happen. Now, the second place that you can use a GIPLET is in a redevelopment area. So there are 19 redevelopment areas in the city of Phoenix, and they're on the map in front of you. And as you can see, nearly all of them in Phoenix are south of McDowell down to Southern. There is one around Metro Center. There's one with Longview and Minnesota, and there's one in a Target F area that are farther up in North Phoenix. But the reason that happens, you see them kind of make down to the south, is they are redevelopment areas. So you're taking those older areas of the city and you're helping them redevelop into new and vibrant, people want to live again. You're getting investment happening in there. Now, in those 19 redevelopment areas, you cannot have an abatement of property tax. You can have an excise tax for up to 25 years. And as I said, the excise tax is very prescriptive. It is based on per square foot and the discipline, whether it's multifamily or office or retail, and it increases on an annual basis by producer price index. As you look at some of the goals and objectives of the city council, I can see us in the coming years, and this is for the lion's share, will be outside of the area served by Phoenix Elementary, looking at the housing that's fixing the missing middle. So the housing that we've seen downtown Phoenix become very expensive to live. We've seen other areas becoming very expensive to live. So using this tool in other redevelopment areas of the city to help keep those rents down for that 25-year period of time by utilizing this excise tax. It is important to note abatement is not an option. In other words, that 8 years of abatement of property tax can't take place. As soon as certificate of occupancy happens, they move immediately onto the excise tax. I think one of the other important things to note is while the projects are under construction, they stay on full ad valorem property tax. They are not removed from full ad valorem property tax until the property owner transfers the ownership of the property to the city. Remember, we don't pay property tax for that period of time. So as we look at the benefits of GIPLET as the city has used it over the last 2 decades, we've seen about 18,000 new jobs that are a direct benefit from GIPLET, about $1 billion of annual payroll, $3 billion of construction, a new construction capital investment, $35 million in construction sales tax to the city, $99 million in taxes to Maricopa County and to the school districts, $250 million to the state. And we see an increase of about $233 million and about $233 million to the city of Phoenix. It's about $17 million annually that taxes to the city of Phoenix has increased by with the use of these GIPLET projects. So as we look at the benefits that the city has used this to cause, its execution of the general plan, as we talked about, creating a dense urban downtown. If not, what you'd see would be the 4-story sticks all along light rail as opposed to the high-rise development. We're trying to cause 300 people, 500 people to live on 2 or 3 residential lots, as opposed to, you take up 3 or 4 or 5 acres, 7 acres for these different types of project. It's been the development of vacant or underutilized parcels. It has been preservation of historic buildings to the HP community. These historic buildings are incredibly important to me. They're incredibly important in ways that we can work to save them. Money's been deposited into the Affordable Housing Trust. We have used it to leverage percentages of the development to accommodate for workforce housing. They reset the rents to 80 to 120% of the area median income. We've used it to solve the food desert, not just for downtown, but for all areas to the south and the east and the west of downtown. Creation of public parking, new office space, retail space for startups, and to create that density that supports those existing businesses. So when you look at downtown and how those activities have happened, it's really been to revitalize downtown and turn it back into that sense of place that existed here from the late 1800s until the 1970s. So we did a study of our downtown, and I'm going to walk through it very quickly with you just to give you a flavor of what that downtown market is today. So if we look at our office space, it's just over 13 million square feet of total office space. Our vacancy rate is 13.5%, which is typical across the country right now. In fact, we're probably lower than a few of the spaces because we've not had the pandemic challenges in our office buildings that others have had. Our rental rates are right around $29, and our square footage that has been constructed since 2000 is 2.9 million square feet. One of those important things to note on this slide that you see in front of you, The new and modern office buildings that have been built are occupied quickly. They're 100% occupied. But we have to get our rents to $48 a square foot to be able to support new construction. So Tempe Town Lake commands $48 a square foot. It supports new construction. And what I mean by that is the developer has to pay the debt service. They have to pay for running the office building and functioning the office building. And about $48 a square foot is what it takes to support that $400 a square foot of development. The other findings we found is there is a high concentration of high wage jobs in downtown Phoenix. 18.9% of the city's information technology workforce works in downtown Phoenix. 9% of the professional, scientific, and technical workforce work in downtown Phoenix. And in fact, 9.6% of the city's total employment works in downtown Phoenix. The whole 517 square miles works, 9.6% works in just 3.8 square miles. So downtown is 0.7% of the total city area, but accounts for 9.6% of the workforce. It's that density. It's those dense office buildings that are there. If we look at the average wages, the wages in downtown Phoenix exceed those that are around the rest of the city. So if we look at our services, you'll see about $80,000 is the average salary of those highest annual wages that are in downtown Phoenix. And the average wage in downtown Phoenix is right around $70,000. Now, that's not the average household income, that's the average wage in downtown Phoenix. Downtown is also a net importer of jobs. And what I mean by that is when you look at the entire city, we have 44 employees for every 100 residents. So that means that residents of Buckeye are coming into Phoenix, residents of Phoenix are going into Goodyear to work. Everybody's moving across the borders to work. Downtown Phoenix flips 288 employees for every 100 residents. So downtown Phoenix is a net importer of jobs. People are driving in from the suburbs to come to work in downtown Phoenix. And we're trying to leverage our housing stocks and our opportunities to cause more people to live in downtown Phoenix, that work in downtown Phoenix, to relieve some of the congestion that happens on our roadways, but also pays homage to the built environment that was already put in so many years ago. When we look at new construction, I'm just going to run through these quickly. This is everything that you see. I'm going to run through a couple projects are in front of you. Anything that has a red dot has a GIPlet that goes along with it, just so it made it easy for you to be able to tell. So Block 23, the Ryan, helped solve the food desert. The 850 PBC is a new science and technology building. You have the Suns Arena, which is just completing its renovation. The AC Hotel by Marriott just opened. The McKinley is open. The Phoenix Forge is a great project with our community college system to create makerspace into historic warehouses. And Connect Phoenix took an old parking lot and constructed there from an old development agreement. The Battery, X Phoenix, Eco Phoenix, Adeline, the Ray, Mercer, Link Phase 2, Portland Broadstone, the Derby, and Portrait on the Park are all under construction. We look at the ASU Innovation Dorm, Home 2 Suites, the Ellis, and Thunderbird School of Global Management are also all under construction and nearing their completion. What we have planned, you have residences on 2nd, Central Station, the Barrister Building, St. Ambrose, X Base Camp, Sky on 6th, the First Street Townhomes, and Palm Court Tower. So lots of great stuff that's still coming into downtown Phoenix, building new residential units, new research and development space, new office space, and new retail space. So our study outcomes, quickly, it shows that the study that was completed by Rounds Consulting for us about 60 days ago shows that downtown Phoenix has a strong demand for multifamily, and that demand continues to exceed the supply. Even with the increase in supply, we've seen a decrease in vacancy and an increase in rental rates. And in fact, if you look across all of the metro area, downtown Phoenix is absorbing its residential units at 4.5 times faster than the rest of Metro Phoenix is absorbing its downtown. So we're bringing 9,000 new people to be in downtown, to be here in the school district. We also find a strong demand for office space. It is the single largest employment corridor in the state of Arizona. We need new and modern office space to continue to attract those jobs. We've seen some flight out of downtown Phoenix into some of that new and modern office space on Tempe Town Lake and Scottsdale, in Chandler and Gilbert and others. And the market in downtown Phoenix is really shifting to a knowledge-based economy. So 2012, there were 67 technology companies in downtown Phoenix. There's 450 today. So we've seen an astronomical increase in that knowledge economy in downtown Phoenix. With all the new people moving in, with all of the jobs coming in, there is a strong demand for destination unique retail, entertainment options, and our convention center, and really creating that sense of place. If you've been to a convention or a conference before in another state, you know, you walk out of the convention center, there's things to do, there's restaurants, there's a nightlife for you to shop and separate you from your money in the city so that you leave your money behind. So just wanted to walk through those items with you from the GIPLET. I will note before the next presenter does come up, and then of course available for any questions you might have, the City Council did ask Joseph and Zandon and I for a presentation that we completed with them at one of their June meetings just a few months ago. City Council is looking at GIPLET as we talk about that changing market focus, how it's changed over the years, and how they want to leverage it to take Phoenix to the next level. We all agree we've got a lot of residential, we're doing a good job there, and looking at how we best and as we most minimally can utilizing this tool. So as an example, there's about 100,000 properties in the city of Phoenix. 22 of them have a GIPLET. So and nearly all of them are here in downtown Phoenix. The rest are around Sky Harbor in that area. So I did want you to note that City Council is reevaluating the GIPLET tool and how they will be utilizing it in the future. We will go back to them in the fall, most likely October, November. We are working with them in one-on-ones right now. Staff has done significant research. We're going back to them with additional information, and we will absolutely let Dr. Weeks know when that's going to be heard at the City Council meeting. So if any of you would like to be there or like to speak to the council members, you'll know well in advance that that's coming.
May I ask if we will receive a copy of this presentation?
I'd be honored to provide that to you.
That would be
Yes,
great. If you could send it to Dr. Weeks, then he could get it to the board.
it is already with Dr. Weeks, and so I'm sure he will get that to you, but it would be my honor for you to take that.
Thank you very kindly.
My pleasure.
So we're asking questions after the next presenter?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. But also, you should have a packet that has this presentation in there. Yeah, so it's in the, we thought that we're going to go in a different order, so it's in the second part of the packet. I'm sorry. Thank you for presentation, and like we said before, we want to kind of give you an overall preview of the GPLET program, at the city of Phoenix, and but also want to discuss now how it impacts us, in the district. And so part of it, this program, it does reduce the funding for the district by way of lower property taxes that we get as a result of this program. But also, there's some ways that the city has put together to kind of make up for part of the loss. And so that's part of what we want to talk about today and figure out how do we kind of work those things together. So with we began working with this particular program here at the district in 2014 by way of obtaining agreements with developers that they will make what we call basically a GPLET donation, back to the district, and that's something that we'll discuss. The different projects that are in place now, and that was really based on a kind of a project by project basis. That we'll discuss this in a little bit as well. To date, we have established 6 GPLET donation programs with developers, and we have a list here that we're going to share with you as well. But also of that list, not all of them are active right now for different reasons. But we do have a couple that they're active, and we're actually getting donations from the developers along the way. And also we have one that's pending that we're being asked, and we're talking to developer about, basically they want to make another contribution to us as a GPA donation program. And that's something that we'll be discussing with the board and at the next meeting to approve that, that donation agreement. The district, however, has not established any new GPLET donation agreements since 2017. And so we'll get into that discussion as well, as we move along here. So I want to discuss a little bit of the process that happens here with these agreements. And so there's basically three parties here that are involved: the city of Phoenix, the developer, and this would be different developer depending on the project, and then also the school district. And so on the city's part, it starts out with basically the city making an announcement when they have a possible or a pending GPLET agreement that they're working with the developer on. And that's the part that Chris Mackey mentioned earlier. And they also develop an analysis of the estimated impact that it could have on the district and as far as the tax consequences of that. And also at that point, the city informs the developer that a GPLET donation may be included in their developer's lease agreement at the time that they initiate the whole process. Then the developer, when they have this agreement set up with the city of Phoenix, then they contact us to let us know that they would like to make a donation or have a donation program that typically goes anywhere from 8 to 20 years, in some cases more, that they want to work with us on. They will at that point we begin working with them on developing a donation agreement, and then when the project is near completion and they get the certificate of occupancy, that's when the process of actually getting the funds and the donations begins. From the school side and the district side, there's a few things that we do is we provide a letter of support for the city of Phoenix to support the initial setup of the GPLET agreement between them and the developer. And also when we get contacted from the developer that they want to work with us on developing this donation agreement, we also get with legal counsel. In this case, we're working with Laura Blanco with Gus Rosenfeld. So they review the agreement with us, and we will cover that with the board and ultimately get that approved. So that's kind of the basic process when it comes to setting up these the actual GPLET donation agreements. And so we want to be clear about there's a difference between just a GPLET agreement that the city works with the developer on. This one is more of a donation agreement that we set up with the developer after that that's in place. Here's a list of the projects right now that we have agreements on. And the last one here is still pending. That's something that we need to review with the board and get your approval on. So that's something we'll leave for discussion. We can talk about it as well today, but also we're going to bring it back to the board at the next meeting for approval. And we notated these in different colors because we started out basically 6 agreements over the years, beginning in 2014, and then up to now 2016, and then the last one here that we began talking to them in 2017, and they're actually changing developers. That's the reason we're bringing it back to you, at this time, next, at the next meeting. And the ones that are in green, that they're in place, they've been in place since 2014. We've been getting contributions from them over the years. And in these 2 particular cases, the terms were, first of all, the project is Union and Roosevelt, and also Broadstone Art District. The terms were for them to provide a $6,000 contribution for the first 8 years, annually for the first 8 years, and then $13,000 to the district for the next 9 to 25 years of the overall lease agreement. In the case of the Broadstone, their terms are $31,000 per year for the first 8 years, and then $17,000 a year from 9 to 20 years. And then the ones in yellow have also been agreed to, and they're actually in place, but the projects have not been completed yet, so we're not at the point that we're actually receiving donations yet. And if you look at the kind of the reasons here, some of them are still pending statuses for just completion, where they have not received their C of O, the certificate of occupancy. Same thing with the other yellow item here, Derby Roosevelt. That's also, that one has there's going through some litigation with the developer on this. So it's being put on, it's on hold right now. And so we'll see how that plays out. And then the ones in red are those basically have stopped. The project didn't complete for whatever reason. So it didn't come to completion. So it didn't kick off the actual donation agreement because it didn't get ultimately the certificate of occupancy. And if you look at the overall terms here, and if all these things were in place, and active, it would be to the tune of $3,366,000. But also that's over a 20-year period. In some cases, 25 years for, I think, one of these or a couple of these. But basically, that's the amount of donations that we will receive as a district if all these were in place and active and completed at some point. So the one thing that we're working on, and we need to figure out ways that we can improve the opportunities and improve the process how we're developing these, is that we first of all need to reconcile with the city of Phoenix as to the current development projects and determine if there's a way that we can actually engage with them on a donation agreement with the developer. So that's something that we'll be discussing with the city and with Ms. Mackey's office, and see if that's something that could happen. The other is that we want to reaffirm existing agreements, the ones that are in place now, which is really only 2. Right now they are paying and they're paying on time, and so we want to ensure obviously that continues. But also we want to hopefully see the other projects that are in yellow come to completion and hopefully get those donations going as well. The other thing we need to work on is if we do have cases where developers are not paying their donation that they agreed to, then we'd like to be able to work with the city on how we can get those caught up, and in some cases, again, with the ones that are still pending, because it's been some time since they began the project, we need to probably reaffirm with them to make sure that they know we have this agreement in place, and that they continue paying when they do get their certificate of occupancy. And also, just one thing that we need to also work on is that, especially some of these other projects get completed, we start receiving these donations. We want to figure out as a board and also as a district, what do we do with these funds? How do we use them? I mean, there's some ideas here that we thought about, but also I'm sure there's many others too that we can look at. We can help support our before and after school programs. That right now need a lot of support. Instructional assistance programs, pre-kinder programs, enhancement of facilities. So it's somewhat unrestricted funding that we can use. Obviously, it's got to be used for the improvement of the schools and for students. But there's different ways that we can use this funding for, that we can make a decision as a board, as administration. And so that's this basically was where we stand now. And but also obviously we'd like to have a discussion about how we want to move forward with the current agreements that we have in place, and then any future agreements that we have in place. So that's also another opportunity with thanks for Ms. Mackey being here today, that we can have the discussion and just kind of put our heads together and come up with some solutions. So with that, I am done. So if there's any questions of me or Ms. Mackey, we'll be glad to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Quintana. Thank you, Christine, for those presentations. I appreciate you. GPLIT is something that has been a concern for me as a school board member, as someone who's been living in Phoenix for over 10 years. It's something that I've been paying close attention to, especially as a school board member, because from the presentation alone, I can already see a bunch of red flags that have been raised for me as a school board member, as someone, a resident of Phoenix, of downtown Phoenix. And calling this meeting, I want to raise awareness of whether the economic development program is working or whether it's not working. And from the presentation, it's pretty clear that it's not working, and that, as to Mr. Quintana's point, there's a lot of relationship building that we need to do with the city that I'm disappointed and ashamed about, because this is not something, this is not where we should be at with the city when it comes to these agreements and receiving the funding that we do need to receive for our school district to stay financially stable. And I'm sure the city, the mayor, I'm sure you are very well versed on the financial situation school districts are in across the state. And when we look at these GPLET agreements and the agreements that are being made, and especially we're at a crossroads in which we're losing our student population, our communities of color that are being pushed out because of these raising property taxes. That's something I know that in the time we're at, that's something that we need to focus on, especially when stability is what a lot of our students need right now in this pandemic. And especially with our school, with the financial situation that we're in, this is something that is going to take a long-term approach for us to support and to either augment or go back to our decision in 2017 to not enter into these agreements. But this is something I requested, and I know the board members are concerned about too, because of the situation that we're in. With that said, I do have some questions that maybe you can, that I'm sure you can expand on, Kristen. Thank you. So in terms of the GPLETs, what would you say are the cons of the GPLETs? I heard a lot of positives, but I didn't hear any cons about this economic development tool.
Sure, absolutely. So, if I could add some color, Board Member Creo, to what you said. So I agree with you. I don't take my economic development role lightly. So my team this year alone brought in $13 billion of new capital investment into Phoenix and 12,000 jobs whose average salary was $56,000. We take our role very, very seriously. We don't do what we do lightly. I want to call a couple of examples to you, because it's a complicated tool, and it on its face value, you look at it, you're like, wow, that just makes no sense whatsoever. But let's use a couple of real world examples of where things were for the school district, for the city, for the county. We all get property tax. My salary is paid off of property tax. So I completely respect that position. When you look at, let's use Arizona Center as an example. So I've been here my whole life. And so I remember when Arizona Center was some older buildings, and a developer came in, was not with the city. I was in high school, but did come in to redevelop the area but that would have been 1989, mid 1980s. And those properties altogether paid $130,000 in property tax. Arizona Center was built. I would argue that Arizona Center would not have been built without utilizing the GPLET tool. When it came off in 2011, those same properties were paying over $3 million a year in property tax. When you look at one of these projects that builds on, two 14,000 square foot lots, those lots are paying about $23,000 in property tax going into it. As they've completed, they're paying somewhere between $700,000 and $1 million in property tax. So I don't ever argue anybody's position on GPLET. I really respect individuals' position on GPLET, particularly our wonderful school board members, because your lion's share of your revenue, we're a very small portion of property tax. You are the largest portion of the property tax, and I really respect that. I would argue that these redevelopments that are happening, we did GPLETs on certain projects. As soon as the market seated itself, we stopped doing them on hotels. We did them on a couple of 4-story stick developments. As soon as they seated themselves, we stopped doing them. We've been doing them on high-rise residential development. I think it's very much nearing the end of needing, and I think it's coming on its own now. Office development still needs it. So, Board Member Carrillo, I would never be disrespectful and argue with you, but just wanted to put some color on why, as an economic developer, I would have to make and inform council and you of sometimes very tough decisions to get the older areas of our city redeveloping so they can bring more property tax and not take away property tax.
Thank you. That was a great example, Arizona Senator. You also mentioned other examples too, and just having a discussion, arguing, is that you mentioned other examples too, and that's where my fear is too, is what something that I want to relate to the city is that we can use the Sky Harbor as an example, right? And we see those who come here, who have lived here, especially in that community, are no longer in that community because they displaced the community. And we can look at, it's not the city of Phoenix, but we can look at the Rio Salado and Tempe, which displaced the whole indigenous community, right? And so this does have long-term impacts because then the same is going to continue and repeat in South Phoenix. And those are fears that are being realized. And so when the city as a city meets in October, September, as you said, or November, I would urge the city and urge you to look at, or maybe you already know and you can expand on that, other alternative economic development tools instead of tax incentives, because the Sheraton is another example that was there. However, the Sheraton was already there, yet it received another tax incentive, and you can fact check me. I'm sure you're the expert. Received another tax incentive. However, it was still there. So in terms of the argument that these incentives are needed to bring in development, there are cases where development's there and they receive the tax incentive. And then another fear of mine too, another concern is that that these burdens are being pushed onto property owners, not developers, but are being pushed off to property owners. And so when I talk about loss of our student enrollment, talk about the loss of our family, it's because they're not able to afford those rents or those property taxes.
Yeah, Board Member Creo, all great questions. So I'll start at the beginning and work my way up to the end of your questions. When we look at the Sky Harbor area, the aviation land reuse area, that over the 70s and 80s and 90s, families were moved out of the noise abatement area or out of these areas, and I wasn't here. I hear from the families when I go out into the community meetings. I hear from the families what they experienced, and I think that that was a very dark time in Phoenix's history as to these things happening. In fact, I have a new team member that works for me we're now leading the effort to help rebuild that area. And so as opposed to tearing it apart anymore, our goal is to now work with the 2-year study that community went through and bring back what the community wants. And I know we call it the Lars area. I know it I know it very, very well, what the community, the one thing we can't put back in most of the area is residential, because it's still in an aviation overflight area, and FAA paid money in the area. But there are areas where we've gone back to the FAA and they've agreed to let us take those sites back out to put residential. One of the sites that's out right now is 14th Street in Jefferson along light rail. That was part of the land reuse area. And our team has taken that out for affordable housing. And so we're very excited and very hopeful to see what's going to come along in there. The community is interested in sports and entertainment facilities, not like the Suns, but soccer fields, open park areas, a mercado, jobs, things that come into that area. And so I have a team member, his sole focus is that area. And our hope is working with the community, we'll be able to right the wrongs that happened in history and be able to help rebuild, if not the community, because we can't put residential, rebuild what the community that remains and the community remembers by bringing back in. As an example, we did a transaction not very long ago with the Sacred Heart Church to be able to reactivate the Sacred Heart on a long-term basis again and turn it into a fully functioning every Sunday worship church. So that community that was high on their list, that happened. And I was lucky enough, I got to lead that transaction about 2 years ago to bring them back. As we move forward, so the GIPLET tool as we would use it, and I don't disagree with you, the revitalization community, the South Phoenix community, that community, they're terrified that we're going to do what we did to downtown, utilizing our tools to them. I looked them all straight in the eye and told them, under my leadership, that won't happen. We'll work with the community. We'll leverage these tools to bring what is of interest to them. It is attainable housing. It is new restaurants. It's new retail. It's areas for them to be outside with their families. And we're working. I have another employee who that's his sole focus, is working on that area. I believe in that Rio Salado, the Rio Reimagined area so much. My next 5 years that's the vision that I want to work towards. Is we've secured Arizona Fresh for the old former landfill. It's a food innovation center that will help solve the food desert in the area. We're taking out 24th and Broadway as to the grocery stores, a true food desert. So we're really trying. What we've done in downtown is not at all what will happen south of Lincoln and up to that mountain. So you bring very great points. And one last, if I might, the Sheraton. So the city built the Sheraton. No property taxes were paid on the Sheraton since the time it was built. I was not involved in that transaction. That was handled by a different individual in the city manager's office. And there was a negotiation that took place. The city was in a very rough position. It built the hotel just in time for the downturn and all conferences to stop and things that caused great challenges. The city needed to get, much like the board has to make decisions on things to jettison that are just costing too much money. The city made the decision, city council made the decision to sell the Sheraton. As part of the sale of the Sheraton, there was a 25-year excise tax GIPLET that was put on the Sheraton. It's not an abatement. It is paying an excise tax to each of the taxing jurisdictions. But that is the only example other than preservation of a historic building I can think of where GIPLET was used. But thank you. You raised 3 really good points, 2 of which are great passions of mine.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that. And then and I'm specifically interested as another example of the Astra project. Or you can use the Sheraton project. So for either one, what is the tax incentive for the Astra, and then what was it for the Sheraton?
So you asked a really good question before. What other tools do we have that can cause redevelopment? The unfortunate thing is, or fortunate, whichever position of the coin you're on, there are very, very few tools that exist in the state of Arizona to cause redevelopment. As I mentioned, in 49 other states, you can use tax increment financing. And what that does is it lets you reset your property tax to recoup the amount of infrastructure that you put in and the appreciation that you do of that infrastructure. So it lets those things happen in at the same manner, but without the abatement. But some are abatements just based on how long that they are for. For Astra has a GIPLET application that is pending with the city council, and that is the benefit they've asked for. The city council has put a pause on GIPLETs right now while they study it. So they did ask staff to hold its recommendation. It has sat before a public panel, and the public panel did recommend to move forward with the GIPLET. My recommendation was to move forward with the GIPLET, and city council at that time said, let's hold. We have a lot of questions we want to ask. So, and that's one that's in the holding pattern until the council makes those determinations in October and November. And then the council will make that decision if they even want to hear that application or not. The Sheraton, as I mentioned, was built and owned by the city. So it didn't pay any property taxes. We didn't get any incentives to build it. It was built with city bond funding. And so by selling it, we were able to satisfy the city bond funding and take that off of the debt burden of the city.
And thank you. And then, so how much would it be for the Astra project if approved?
How much would
The GIPLET
development?
agreement, yeah,
The
the
GIPLET
abatement.
You know, we do an extensive financial analysis. So we're asked for a GIPLET probably, oh my gosh, 4 or 5 times more than we ever say that we ever move an application forward. We have a very extensive financial analysis that we run that shows whether they need one or not to get the project to completion. I apologize. I don't recall. We'll get that to you. I don't recall what the Astra number was, but typically on a project of that scope and scale, their property tax would be around $1 million, $1.2 million a year. And so there would be, if you multiply that over 8 years, that's 8 million times 2, $9.6 million, $9.2 million. And then they are required, you know, they would be required to pay the school district, they pay the city rent. They would be required to provide 10% of workforce housing. So we count against that. There there is court findings today that require that the taxing jurisdictions get more than they give. And so we have to make sure that that agreement is balanced. The city gets construction sales tax, it gets lease tax, it gets these other things that are guaranteed. But I'll be happy to provide that through Dr. Weeks for you.
Thank you. So that would be, well, the 8-year abatement, not the 25.
Yes, Board Member Creo, the 25 years does not exist anymore. It is solely an 8-year abatement if you are in a central business district in a redevelopment area. That changed in 2016. So unless you can pick one or the other, you can have the 8-year abatement, or you can have 25 years on excise tax. An excise tax on a project like that, they would recognize $150,000, $200,000 a year in savings. And their application is for the 8-year abatement and the 8-year abatement only. So it is just for 8 years.
And in terms of you talking about the donation or those agreements, that's another concern is that what I'm seeing here is we have 6, 7 of these G-plets, the yellow, the red coating, and the green coating. This might be a question for Mr. Quintana. Or both of you. But
You're a good
it's
team.
my concern is the accountability for this economic development, because what I'm seeing is we have these G-play agreements and I see 2 are in compliance. The other ones were never completed. Fund Start, they never completed, so we didn't receive the funding. Some are pending.
So if I
So-
could walk through those
Yeah,
with you, if
please.
that would be helpful. So if we look at Ballpark Lofts, it is still under construction. And your agreement with them is that when they get their certificate of occupancy, they will start their payments. It is slated to be completed later this year. So you should start in 2022, seeing those payments from them. When we look at, I'm colorblind, could you, black and red, I'm not able to see. Which project is that one?
Barrister Project.
Barrister. So Barrister was a project that came before this body for the consideration of the GIPLET agreement, and your predecessors approved the GIPLET agreement. The city council did approve the GIPLET agreement. The developer's partner was not able to perform. It is a city-owned building. It's still a city. It was a city-owned building. The developer never was able to go forward. The reason being is we found that the developer, by his partner not being able to perform, they were not living up to the terms of their RFP. The city did go forward and sold that building, and it is now on full ad valorem property tax rolls. It never received a GIPLET, and it never will receive a GIPLET. So as we go next, Union at Roosevelt and Broadstone Arts District are both in compliance. They have completed and they are making their payments to the school district. The next one down is the Derby. The Derby was a court case that was heard late last year or part of last year, and the GIPLET was removed as an incentive. So that property never came off of full ad valorem property tax. It's never had a GIPLET. It's continued to pay the same property tax that it's always paid to the school district since you had been receiving that for all those years. So they're not in default. They will pay you full ad valorem property tax the day that they get their certificate of occupancy, and that the county assessor puts them on the full ad valorem property tax rolls. Right now, you're still getting the property tax that was for the land site that you were always getting. So there is no GIPLET that goes with this. I'm sorry, what's the red one? I did Derby next, is yellow. What was the other red one?
McKinley Courts.
McKinley Court. McKinley Court was an application that submitted through the city. The project never came out of the ground. And so the property was never moved to the city's property tax rolls. You've continued to receive the full ad valorem property tax. So that project is not in default. You've kept receiving the same property tax you've always received on that one. Derby in the yellow will never go on to GIPLET. They will start paying full ad valorem property tax through the county assessor, just like a normal building will. And then the Phoenix Towers Phase 1, that is the link. So the link was approved in 2017.
Yeah.
No, because it was still at 25 years. So pre-2016, it was approved. And it is 3 towers. One tower has completed and has its certificate of occupancy. And I am confused as to what this is on the agenda. I would love to be able to shuffle here really quickly and figure out what it is. So I would, we need to look at that application that they're asking for. I know that they've already got an agreement with the school district for one of the buildings. So that one I'll have to dig into a little bit. I'm not sure exactly what that one is.
Thank you. And anybody can feel free to ask questions. I know I have a few more questions to ask, so feel free to jump in. Let's use the Union at Roosevelt or Broadstone. So if they're paying a total, and I'm trying to read this correctly, of $256,000 for the Union at Roosevelt, and then the Broadstone is paying a total of $435,000. That's donations to us?
That's correct.
And so then so if they didn't have the tax incentive, I'm trying to think of the question to ask here, what would they be paying for those property taxes, or without that GPLET agreement?
So that is an analysis that we do. I don't have that with me here today, and those were agreements that were done in 2014. So I don't remember them from 2014. We do about, 50 million square feet of space on an annual basis. So I don't recall that. We can get this to you. That's the analysis that we do. So if I can walk you through the analysis that we do really quickly.
Please.
We take the cost of the project, we plug it into a model. We take the information on what the apartment can collect in rents, what it costs for marketing, what the construction costs are, what their financing costs are. We take all of the information and we put it into this model. And then we look at what their rate of return will be. And that typically without a GPLET is going to come out somewhere between 4 and 5%. But 4 and 5%, I can put my money in a bank and I don't have risk. I'm not risking my money. Most lending institutions, most investors are looking for a 6% rate of return. So we leverage the GPLET tool then to be able to get those projects to that 6% rate of return, nothing higher, but a 6% rate of return. And so as we run the financial analysis, what we do is we compare that first financial analysis as though the project is on full ad valorem property tax. And then we apply the GPLET, and that typically will move it up kind of half to 1% in the rate of return to the developer. One of the confusions about GPLET is that developers are making millions and millions and millions of dollars off this tax incentive. I will not argue that back in 96 and the early 2000s, that was probably the case. That was a much different GPLET than exists today. In today's GPLET, you're going to see on most of them, the property tax on 300 units, 24 stories, high-rise residential, over on an annual basis, they would pay between $700,000 and $1.1 million, just depending on how big they are and what the retail is. So you can kind of do the math in your head as to what that benefit is to getting the project out of the ground. And going back to what I talked about at the beginning, $150 a square foot of construction in greenfield development, or $400 a square foot of construction in an urban downtown. So we try to remember that we're trying to level the playing field for the urban downtown developer, which of course, unfortunately, Phoenix Elementary School District is the school district in that area.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're being impacted by that. And it's not, and I don't believe it's leveling the playing field for families. And to the point is, if that's the average, my thing isn't that they're making millions, is that they're not paying the millions that they should be paying to us. And to that point is like, if that's what they would be paying, then this 256 is 435,000. It seems like it pales in comparison to what that average cost would be.
And if I might provide clarification, so the Union at Roosevelt and Broadstone are not high rises. They are, Union at Roosevelt is 5 stories, and Broadstone, I think, is 4 or 5 stories. They're much smaller projects. Their property tax is probably closer to $300,000 on an annual basis. They're not 24 stories. They're the 5-story projects. We can get that number, but my guess is just from doing this for so long, they're probably they would have been paying around $300,000 in property tax, not the $1 million in property tax. And if I might, just to respectfully call a clarification. So as we look at these projects, what we look at is what the taxing jurisdictions are getting today on vacant dirt. And the taxing jurisdictions altogether are getting somewhere between $10,000 and $30,000 on the vacant dirt. And that's what all the taxing jurisdictions are dividing up, is that amount of money. By bringing this dense urban development, our goal, and I realize it's, again, this is a philosophical difference that a lot of people have, and I'm very respectful of that. Our goal is actually to drive those property taxes and all those investments up for the individuals that are collecting on the school district, the city of Phoenix, the county, and the restaurants and retail that are in the area. If you look at, at a 19-story, they would, pay $23,000 today, they'll pay $700,000 as they come off the GIPLET in just 8 years. And so I would respectfully, my very respectful position is, as we've worked on GIPLETs from 2014 to 2020, these projects would not have built. We'd still be getting that same $13,000 to $30,000 of property tax. We'd still have the vacant lots that are around there. And remembering that it's not like we can say, well, single family residential could have gone in, or townhouses could have gone in, or all these things. The downtown core, which is the zoning code that oversees all of this, would not let those, you couldn't go back and put those items back on those lots. It calls for dense urban development when you kind of are between the threes, 3rd Street to 3rd Avenue. It calls for that dense urban development. So getting those properties back into production so that they're not slum and blighted, so that they have a productive use, that we've tried to be very cautious with the tool. As I stated earlier, we have about 22 GIPLETs out of 100,000 properties, and we've tried to we're asked for it so much more often than we agree to move forward with it. But that is the purpose of us using it. Is my professional belief until recently is that these projects wouldn't build without it. As I said, we incented hotels until they were lifting all on their own weight. We did the 4-story, the Union and Broadstone and Battery, and we never did one again. They're all building on their own. It's to seed the market and get the market producing all on its own weight.
Thank you for that. And then the until recently comment is related to what factor?
So, board member, we try to keep our finger on the pulse of everything that's happening. So I remember in 2014, so I was Chandler's economic developer for 16 years. And I came to Phoenix over this 517 square miles in 2014. And that's why I kind of struggle with anything before 2014. As we run our financial models, it tells us how big the gap is in the debt service, in the interest rates, in what these apartments can produce. And I remember a developer telling me in 2014, we just have to get the rents to $2 a square foot. We can just get them to $2 a square foot, we'll be in good shape. So those were kind of in 2014, that's where we lived. And as we started bringing development into downtown Phoenix, we don't just say, oh yeah, GIPLETs for everybody. We still run that model on every single one. And in 2019, they got closer. And in 2020, they got closer. So that unaffordability that we all fear so much is causing, those rents are causing it so the developers don't need the GIPLET. They can afford the debt service. They can go right into full ad valorem property tax. And as we are doing the analysis in 2021, we're looking at it and it is very close. It is very, very close. And that's the information we're sharing with council, is that for multifamily, the market is just about over that hump and then able to seed itself all on its own. For office, we are still $29 to $48 a square foot apart.
So for a decision like that to be made, is that written in Phoenix policy, or is that consultation from you that you provide the council and then they go forward with that type of decision?
Board Member Creo, that's exactly the presentation that we did for them back in June. And that was one of the questions from Councilman Stark. She asked that question, do we still need GIPLETs today? And I kind of walked her through exactly as I'm walking you through. You know, we used to need it for hotels. We don't need it anymore. We used to need it for 4-story stick just to get people living back in downtown Phoenix. Don't need it anymore. our numbers are showing for high-rise residential, we are almost there, if not there. We are within a project or two. The reason, and for office buildings, we are a decade away at least of being able to make that work. And there's not been a GIPLET used on an office building since 2000. The last one that was used was for Redevelopment for the grocery store in Ryan and the office building that's there. So that was an older GIPLET that was on that project. That's exactly what we're bringing back to council. That's exactly what we're talking about them now. We're showing them, we're very transparent. We show them our math, we show them our analysis. They're looking at that now, and then they make the policy decisions. Staff makes recommendations, staff walks them through the analysis. The council tends to not set a hard in stone policy because there's always an exception to the policy. You know, as an example, as I mentioned to you, we don't need to incent hotels anymore. However, there was a hotel that was going to level the Fuller warehouse in the warehouse district. The building was not on the historic register, and they could have leveled the building. He told me he was going to level the building. And I said to him, that is such a cool old building. Please, that's part of Phoenix's history. Don't level the building. He said, too expensive for me to keep the building. It needs about $2.6 million of roof work, shoring up, renovation, and then the site isn't as efficient if you leave the building sitting there. I can get different ramping, different parking. So we brought the GIPLET tool to bear. The GIPLET is about a $2 million benefit to that hotel, and 2.6 million in additional cost to the developer to keep the building. So he's actually upside down by a little bit to keep the building, but we leverage it. So you can see that hard in line policy of no hotels, the council really, the historic preservation community and the council really wanted to save that building. And so they did utilize that tool. Now, what council does do is it gives staff direction of this is what we'd like to see are these tools leveraged for. And they give staff that direction. And once staff has that direction, we bring back to council. I'm not going to bring something back to them that I know isn't what they want to see. And if they provide us that guidance and direction, unless there's exception, like the Fuller warehouse, and we can explain that, then we follow that direction. And we're hoping for that direction from them in October, November.
Thank you. Can you go really quickly back to, this was on Kitana's presentation actually, was that relationship, but I want to hear from the city so the city of Phoenix initiates the agreement, then the developer, and I'm looking at this visual, acts as the middleman, and then my question just from thinking about this is, so the city steps off at that point and then developer starts entering into negotiations with us? Is that process and that relationship right there?
If I could, if you don't mind, kind of from, as my mom likes to say, soup to nuts. The way that these work, so the developer approaches the city, we have what is called a downtown, it is called a redevelopment application. It is available to anybody on the website that whether you're a small business, whether you're a small developer, a big developer, it's available for you on our website. They submit in on our redevelopment application as to why they feel like they need a city incentive, whether it's a street fixed, whether they need us to run a water line, they need us to bring in sidewalks, they want to utilize the GIPLET, they submit an application to us. When that application comes to us, we review the application. Zandon and Joseph start working on a financial analysis. We then seat a community panel and a panel of experts. So there will be a developer, there will be a contractor, there will be maybe a broker, there will be community members from in the community, depending on where the application is, whether it's in Roosevelt Row, whether it's in FQ Story, or wherever it's at, Evans Churchill, whether it's Downtown Voices, wherever it's at. A member or two of the community will sit on that panel. It's a confidential panel. They review the applications. I seat the panel, but I don't participate in the interview process. That is up to the procurement officer. That panel reviews it and makes a recommendation to me. And if they recommend that they are in agreement with the incentive that the developer is looking for, it comes to me. I then see the documents for the first time. I review them and I either concur with their recommendation or I set aside their recommendation. We then let City Council know that there's a transparency policy that's in effect. and that we are going to be negotiating for this transaction. We meet with the developer. We start to talk to them about what it is that they need. We negotiate through that transaction. One of the things that we did pre-2017 is we would then send the developer to meet with the superintendent of Phoenix Elementary School District. They come to a private agreement with Phoenix L. The city's not a party to the agreement. They come to a private agreement with Phoenix Elementary School District. And until 2017, Phoenix Elementary School District would send a letter of support or a letter of non-support on the GIPLET that was being proposed. In 2017, as you so well stated, Board Member Creo, that's when the board decided not to provide those letters any longer, so those weren't provided. However, staff still provided the developer with the financial analysis that showed the loss to the school district and required them to get ready to make a donation to the school district. Even though you weren't a party, you didn't have a contract with them, we still required it as part of our work going forward. That was very important to the city council, and we still required that work to take place. So the private agreements that exist, we're not a party, we don't collect the checks, they come directly to the school district. As Dr. Weeks has taken over and as we're working all together, they have asked us to become back more intimately involved, have regular meetings to talk about all that's going on again, so that you know these things are coming before you get a 60-day letter. We are very excited to improve our relationship and go back to that. Now, while that's a private agreement between you and the developer, the city considers that a material term to what we are doing with the developer. If they're not paying, I am happy personally to reach out to those developers and ensure that they pay. So I think Dr. Weeks and we are all going to be working together so they can provide us the list. And I'm a mom, so I can be really, really challenging when I call somebody and tell them they haven't been doing something. So we are very excited to take over that role and help the school district in that manner.
Thank you, Christine. Quintana or Dr. Weeks, can you explain why in 2017, the previous board, thank you, Christine, why the previous board had made that decision to cut off negotiations?
The board felt at the time that there was not the accountability in place that the board was really looking for. And that we were trying to conduct an analysis at the time to try to figure out how we could best get these resources back to the community, back to the taxpayers. There was no accounting vehicle for that. You can't receive the revenue and then send back to the treasurer and then offset somebody's property taxes in the same way that the GIPLET made the local community provide additional cash. So you have to kind of understand how the cash flow works. So the way the cash flow works is the GIPLET is issued, and the district then during the 8-year abatement period, there is no property taxes being levied against that. Let's say that's $30,000 lot that Christine was talking about. So there's a net cash deficit to the district. However, the district is a budget-based system, and so those dollars then are replenished by an increase to local property tax owners, the community members, and businesses. So that's kind of how it works. So the board at the time felt like this was, this system was not working out and chose to abandon it. And at the time, I believe there were not a lot of GIPLETs on the horizon, if I recall. But that's arguable. Hindsight being 2020. But that's what I recall in terms of why the board just decided to abandon kind of the GIPLET agreements that Ms. Mackey and Mr. Quintana talked about. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And do you feel like as of now at this point, because again, this is a review to see if we want to continue the last board's decision. And do you feel like now there is an accountability tool that we can look at, or is that still non-existent?
Yeah, I think we need, as a school district, I think we need to take a look at it from more than one lens, right? There's the financial lens, right? There's the the replenishment of tax or cash that was lost based on the issuance of a GPLIT. But also, what we do as a school district is we take a look at it from kind of an enrollment lens as well. So when there is development in our residential communities that drives up the cost of living, drives up the cost of rent and housing and things. And we see that gentrification is taking place, or families are moving out of the local community and moving into other parts of the city outside of our attendance zone, then we have a decline in enrollment. And that's a variable too that has a negative revenue, a negative fiscal impact on the district. And it kind of defeats the mission of what we're trying to get done around here to educate students. So there's more to kind of the GPLIT and the development for a public school district beyond, the reconciliation of property tax cash. So I take a look at it as a superintendent. I take a look at it from a lot of lenses. How does the GPLIT and the gentrification of the neighborhoods impact the rest of the community? How does it impact the school district, et cetera, et cetera? And those are the things that we have seen in our demography reports. Mr. Quintana has generated reports that show that the decline in enrollment over the last 10 years has been, a few thousand students. We are about a 5,500 student district today. When I came in 2012, we were closer to 8,500. And so there's significant impact that I'm not altogether sure that you can create causation, a direct correlation between one and the other, but changes to the community and to the neighborhood have had a significant negative impact on the enrollment of the school district as a whole.
Thank you, Dr. Weeks.
But Mr. Carrillo, I do have a couple of questions for Ms. Mackey,
Okay.
if that's okay, if it pleases the board. So Christine, you said that in 2016, the lawmakers, not council, changed.
That's correct. The state legislation changed.
So legislation changed to provide an either the 8-year abatement or the lease excise tax. So a developer gets to choose, or do you make that decision?
So Superintendent Weeks, remember, it's the either or only in downtown Phoenix. Through the rest of the city and the other 18 redevelopment areas, it can only be the 25-year excise tax. Because to get the abatement, you have to have a redevelopment area overlaying a central business district. Only place that happens is downtown Phoenix. So when you look at, as an example, so the developer will run the analysis, provides us their request for the 8-year abatement, because what they're looking for is they're looking for stabilization. And when the projects are first built, getting them stabilized is where that first 4 years is where they struggle the most, because they've got to have lease up. It takes a couple of years to lease those units, and it takes this time for these things to happen. So they nearly always ask for the 8-year abatement. The 25-year excise tax, that runway is so long, it doesn't benefit the project and the construction costs to get the project out of the ground at the beginning.
I understand. So from 2010 to 2016, the years that I was most familiar with this, we had in the downtown area, we had both the abatement and the lease excise tax, which you say still exists today for within our attendance zone here at Phoenix South.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So then for 8 years, we don't receive any funding, right? That's what it means to abate paying any kind of property taxes. It's kind of the seed that you're talking about.
Yes, sir. And you'll remember that these are all vacant lots. None of them are existing buildings. They're all vacant dirt lots.
Right, right. And then in year 9, they begin to pay a lease excise tax.
No, in year 9, from 10 to 16?
Mhm.
Oh, from 10 to 16, yes. From after 16, they're 8-year abatement, and then they're in year 9, they're full ad valorem property tax since 2016.
So, okay, so that's what happens today.
Yes,
All
yes.
right.
8-year abatement, full ad valorem property tax year 9.
And then on page 12 of your presentation, can you discuss this third bullet with a $sign rent? Where did you come up with $29.08 a square foot on your downtown study findings, downtown office growth?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is the office buildings that are in any area of the city. They post their rental rates, and you can do an analysis of their rental rates to find that determination. And there is much like an MLS listing, there is a program called CoStar, and that is commercial office buildings. You run the area that is the zip codes of downtown Phoenix. You ask it for the average rent, and that is what's produced. That actually came through, not just through the city of Phoenix, but it was analyzed by Rounds Consulting as well. And Rounds Consulting is who produced that report.
Can you give us a copy of that
Happy
report?
to,
I-
happy
I'm
to.
I'm making connections to a lease agreement that we have with a major university in the downtown area.
I
I'd like
thought
to
you
have
might
that
be.
number.
I thought you might be. But remember, that's high-rise office space.
I understand.
That's not single story retail space. That's not warehouse space. That is high-rise office space.
I'm just collecting data. Thank you.
We'd be happy to run any analysis you'd like on any space.
The other thing is workforce housing. We haven't really seen any developer communicate to the district in terms of ready workforce housing for our teaching force or our support staff, folks who work, in our attendance zone, but have to come in from other parts of the city. When do you think we might be able to see contact from developers and other building folks?
Dr. Weeks, members of the board,
Mhm.
those projects that were required to do workforce housing are just starting to complete today. So
Okay.
they are projects that, much like the payments to you, there's a long runway from the time we first meet with them and they first start building. Some of these buildings will take 30 to 36 months to build. I think you'll see the first of them here at the end of 21 or early 22 coming into play. And that's one of the things I think we look forward to working with you again closely on our monthly meetings, is to talk through those projects, to make those introductions. And as you'll remember, the Central Station project that we talked about, that is, in fact, Mr. Harani of Metastar, he is holding those workforce housing units for teachers. His sister is a teacher, and he believes in education. And so they noticed us today that they've received their financing, and they'll be coming out of the ground. They're 36 months to build, but I know Mr. Harani is very excited to bring this workforce housing for teachers. And he did accept a stipulation from the city council that those units have to stay workforce housing for 15 years.
Okay, so my next question has to do with your downtown study findings, market shifting to a knowledge economy. We'd like to spend some time with you to establish business relationships, with business partners who can provide supports to our students, so we can become perhaps better aligned with what we're seeing in the market for jobs in the downtown area.
Dr.
So
Weeks,
maybe
members
one
of
of our monthly meetings, we can begin.
We'd
talk about
love
that.
to do that. We do business retention expansion visits with our employers. And there are a number of school districts around the city that go on those visits with us, that take that information and create those relationships. So we would love that.
Okay. And then just for clarity, Mr. Quintana, on your page 3, where we believed that these agreements were part of the developers agreement. I learned the other day that they're not. They're independent agreements, private agreements between the school district and the developer. So we're going to need some process, some system, so that the city would support developers who don't pay.
Dr. Weeks and members of the board, we'd love to work with you on that language. I think we could very easily figure out a way to capture that in our development, even though it's a private agreement with you and the developer. I think there's a way to note that should this board, choose to move forward with any GIPLETs in the future. There's a way to note that in the development agreement. So you have the strong arm of the city to ensure that those fundings are received. And with or without it in there, you and this board have my word that you have our might behind you.
And then finally, the district's position, Christine, is that we are good neighbors to our communities. And we will continue to be good neighbors to our communities. We're having kind of a very collegial conversation today about GIPLETs. At the end of the day, GPLETs have had negative fiscal and gentrified impacts in our communities. And these are facts. Phoenix Elementary District is very protective of the communities that it serves. And we just want to make sure that we stay on record, that we continue to be concerned for the folks in our community who are picking up additional property taxes because of this development tool.
And Dr. Weeks, I'd love in one of our individual meetings to be able to walk you through some of that analysis so we can show you what that looks like. I'd be happy to do that. And we very much respect the school district's position. And we agree, we love our wonderful Phoenix Elementary community partner and look forward to continuing to work with you and the board.
Thank you very much. I know we have legal counsel here. Laura, did you have anything you wanted to add to this?
Laura Blanco from Gus Rosenfeld. I do a lot of GPLETs in Tucson. Totally different client, but I'm really familiar with the state statutory scheme. And the cities are not required to ask developers to donate money to the schools pursuant to these agreements. Now, the city might have an ordinance, but the state statutes don't require it. So in my opinion, entering into a donation agreement, assuming that you can come up with a number that's fair, only benefits the school district. Any other questions?
Or you review each of these agreements. We have an agreement coming to the governing board at the next regular meeting. Have you reviewed it?
Yes, I have.
Are you confident in its legality?
Yes, and I looked at the underlying lease with the city, and the underlying lease says if you breach the agreement with the district, it's a default under the lease. So the city could potentially terminate the lease, which would be disastrous for the developer. They'd lose their development. So they're highly incentivized to continue those payments and make them on a timely basis.
Madam Chair, those are all my questions.
Anything else?
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
I just wanted to thank Ms. Mackey for coming here today and presenting to us. I know this is a lot of information for us to digest. I know you're a pro at this though. So I thank you and your team for being here. And I think my only comments and recommendations are that the City Economic and Development Department really takes serious the community benefit agreements that are being made with these properties. I think most of downtown and other groups that I'm a part of are just very displeased with, the agreements by the developers that just have not come to fruition on part of the community benefits. And so the way that impacts the community is that the expectations are not met and we lose, the promise of workforce development housing. So that's just one example. And, potentially with the Astor project, losing Second Avenue, adding the extra vehicular lane of traffic is very detrimental to the downtown core, being that, we want to promote pedestrian safety and more walkability. So that's just some examples of how the community benefits have been not accomplished through the GPLETs potentially. So these are just some small examples, but I would just like to see more compliance from the city to make sure that the agreements are being fulfilled. And I really thank you for really explaining to us about how the GPLETs really work. Thank you.
Thank you and your team for joining us tonight. It's always a pleasure to learn more about how this process works. This Astor property, this project that you're having conversations with, is it within our attendance boundary?
Superintendent Weeks, yes, it is. It is immediately to the west of the YMCA building.
Oh, that's right. Okay, thank you.
So Christina, quick rundown, how much GPLET agreements do we have in our district right now that are active?
Board Member Correa, let me get that exact number for you. And I'm just not positive if the 22 are inclusive of those at Sky Harbor. So let me get those for you.
Thank you. And then my last comment would be that I do echo the concerns of Board Member Bueno. largely the community has been unsatisfied with the G-Plat agreements, especially when we talk about food deserts. The price is great that it's there. It doesn't solve the food desert problem. Food deserts are about access to food, proximity to food, the cost of food too, and prices, unfortunately, doesn't solve that situation. With the light rail, it was promising with the light rail. But again, these are just the different nuances of what our communities are dealing with here in South Phoenix and zip codes like 85004. I know that, or this is a question that, so it's not binding, the council, on Tarlego's point, it's not a binding program for the statutory program, is it? So the city just uses this as a tool, it's not binding, it's not something they have to do?
Board Member Creel, so no, the city council has full authority over, they are the only people that are allowed to transact the business of the city of Phoenix. They are not bound to accept a GIPLET. That is an analysis that we work through. That is a lot of meetings that they have, a lot of discussions that they have, and their in-depth analysis as to what they think is best for the city and whether they think this is something that would happen without this tool. So no, they are not bound by law to accept these. This is something they consider at their meetings and they do vote on. And if I could go back to the solving the food desert, I am very proud of the Fry's grocery store that we were able to bring into downtown Phoenix. And the reason I'm especially proud of it, helping to solve the food desert right on light rail, is it was important to me that we selected a grocery store that did not have zone pricing. In other words, if a head of lettuce costs 99 cents in Goodyear or Gilbert or South Phoenix, it costs 99 cents in downtown Phoenix. So that was really important to me to select a grocery store, to recruit a grocery store that did not have zone pricing and would help to solve that food desert. So I appreciate you mentioning that one. That one was important. Our agreements are audited by the auditor's department with the city of Phoenix to ensure that we're in compliance with all of those agreements, that we're not missing anything, that a developer doesn't have any agreement that they're supposed to do all these things that they don't do. They are audited by our auditing department to ensure compliance.
Has that audit been provided to us, or if not, can you provide that to us?
It is something that is done as an internal audit.
Okay.
It's not an external audit. It's to make sure that staff from the city manager's office is working. And so far, we've got 100% on our audits.
Awesome, thank you. And again, I echo those concerns. I also see that you're very focused on this and care about the communities too. And I do, as a district, we're in that situation where we do have to work with the city. The city's initiating these GPLA agreements, and so looking forward, it's coming to agreements that are beneficial to the community, not just to the city, but also to the school district too. And that's where I'm looking forward. That's where I hope that we can start working together and making sure that there is more accountability to this process. I hope the city council takes that and starts implementing measures so to make it more accountable and then more transparent too, so that information is public to us too.
Yep. So to the board and to Dr. Weeks, regardless of your position on GIPLET, please know that our economic development staff is here to work with you, to work with our businesses, to bring whatever we have to bear, whether you are opposed to our GIPLETs, whether you're not. That's not a criteria by which we work together. You're creating our future workforce. You're creating the future people I'll find jobs for. So I look forward, regardless of your position, please know how much we respect and like working with all of you.
Thank you so much, Kristen.
Thank you.
Ms. Mackey, I do have a few questions, and I'll just generalize them. So for time's sake, my questions really are, in your opinion, as far as the processes go, when I hear all of these numbers about high wage paying employers and things like that, immediately I wonder who has these jobs, who are these employees, what do those demographics look like? Because it makes me wonder what the city's process is, or whether or not they take into consideration what that looks like for the community here. So many questions in my head as far as what equity plans the city has going on, how much is that part of your guys' process? There's just a lot that goes around in my head. So there's nothing concrete that you could probably answer maybe, but
I think I could answer a little
Okay.
bit of what you've just talked
Thank you.
about. So when we look at downtown, the Phoenix Elementary School District, one of the reasons that we've been trying to drive more residential down here, we do, Justin McEwen is as a researcher extraordinaire. He can mine data out of places that you can't even begin, you can mine data out of. And he was able to mine the data out of the MAG trip generation surveys. If any of you work for a company that has greater than 25 employees, you have to fill out that trip survey, the trip reduction survey every year. He was able to take that data and mine it, reverse engineer it, because you'll remember you have to, it comes in from your employer as to where you work, and then you put your crossroads as to where you're at. He was able to reverse engineer the information and see where the workforce that works in downtown Phoenix lives. And so it is unfortunately what we found in 2016, the box, McDowell to Grant, and from kind of 7th Street to 16th Street. That's like 7th Avenue to 16th Street, that only of the people that lived in the box, only 1% of them worked in the box. And we've worked, I mean, it doesn't sound like a lot, but you're talking about 58,000 people that work in that box. We've been very proud this year, it moved past 3%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's going in the right direction. But Vice President Trio, one of the things that we work on in my department as well is workforce development. So we put programs together that help the workforce that's in the area get skilled so that they can get the jobs that are available, that they can have a livable wage, they can support their families and put a roof over their head. Because after that, everything else is gravy in my book. And so we also handle the workforce training side. And I think that's one of the areas by which the school district and my team could be working so much more closely together for your parents, for your graduates, for things that we're not even tapping into today. We have such a depth of programs that we could be working on together to help really elevate all that's going on here. And so, you know, while you just hit my passion, I've got goosebumps. So these little things that we, just a conversation, would never have thought of that till just now when we're having that conversation. And sometimes those conversations take us down paths that we never would have thought of. And just you're saying that today, I'm going to reach back out to my team as soon as we get there in the morning and say, hey guys, what about this? Because sometimes we have trouble finding, you know, youth for our internships. We have trouble finding people to apply for really great healthcare benefit jobs. They just go wanting. And we've got funding that can train these individuals. We've got funding that can pay for their childcare. We've got funding that can help them take a better way of life. So would love, as part of our monthly meetings, to start to strategize and bring Lisetta Hogan, our executive director of our workforce board, here and talk about how we can start sharing that information to make even that work. Giplet or no,
Right.
workforce is a whole different animal to me.
And that's exactly where my mind goes to it, is who is that? Who are the people at those tables, the decision making, and are they reaching out to the community and making sure those voices are heard? So thank you very much for the perspective and the potentiality of the conversation.
Thank you, Vice President.
Alicia Van Kier. Giplet was a pretty new term for me as a board member, so I just wanted to thank you for all of the information tonight and thank Mr. Grillo for bringing this important topic to the board and for all of your questions.
Thank you, Governing Board, and again, thanks to Chris Mackey and Ms. Laura Blanco. Thank you very much for being here and joining us today.
Yes, thanks, ladies. Have a good night.
Thank you. Madam Chair, would it be appropriate to take a quick break before we move on to our second presentation?
I think so. Is 5 minutes sufficient? We'll circle back about 8:06. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think our next presentation tonight is about family and community engagement.
Good evening, Madam Vice President, members of the board, Superintendent Weeks, and members of our community. We're going to start our presentation with a video, actually, because we're talking about family and community engagement. And we've been out of school for quite some time, and we want to celebrate what it looks like when we have students on our campuses. And this is a really sweet video that Ms. Jeffries and her team put together for us. We want you to imagine what it sounds like. One guess.
Well, as you saw in the video, this is a historic year for Phoenix Elementary. And we are so excited that we were able to get the sights and sounds of our children and our staff on our campuses and in our facilities. I wanted to share with you when I was at one of the schools on the first day of school, I was talking with Angie, who's a little second grader at Hurd School. And Angie said to me, she said, "This is the best first day ever." And I said, "Why is this the best first day?" She said, "Because we got to come to school." And I thought, coming from a second grader, and you think about our kids
being home for the last year, learning with alongside their parents. But that was so touching to me to just see the excitement of our children. And so this video just really captured that essence. And so I'd also like to just give a special thanks to Mary Hickey Reynoso with Moss Bilingual for coming out to our campuses with me on the first day of school and for producing this video.
I just have one question about the video. Did you know that my son is in the video?
No.
Oh, we did it. I got his little face.
Being added to the website, so you'll be able to do it.
I love it so much. All of it, not just that. Thank you.
But I think that's a beautiful way for us to start when we talk about family and community engagement, because I get so teary when I see those because I love seeing our children engaged and active, and I want our community to see that too. So with that, we have an exciting opportunity in our district, because we talked earlier when we were talking about Giblet, we're talking about how do we preserve the identity of our community and how do we ensure that our community, all of our community members are heard and present and that they are partners in our work. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about philosophy and we're going to review research pretty quickly. And then we want to talk about what our current plan is in terms of the ways in which we are activating our communities. And then we want to look at what's a possibility for taking the stream one step further. So I want to assure you that this is part of our commitment as a district. It's our part of our strategic plan goal. This is a goal that is specifically stated in our strategic plan. But while this is specifically stated, the rest of our strategic plan goals are dependent on the success of this goal. If we don't hit this goal, we aren't going to have the achievement, we're not going to have the enrollment, we're not going to have the highly effective staff. All of this comes together and is predicated on the success of this goal. But because we are committed to this, you also see this in our curriculum audit recommendations. And you see it very specifically in our equity plan and our integrated action plans. This is specifically stated as areas that we want to focus on because we know how important it is to the success of our district, but it's those kids that we just saw. Our community and family engagement practices will really help to influence better outcomes for all of our students. So when we talk today, we really want to make sure that we're clear about some of the terms that we use. Families you're going to hear us refer to families because rather than parents, because that's a more inclusive term and it's more reflective of the true makeup of many of our households. So when we talk about families, those are our caregivers as well as our parents, but it's grandparents, guardians, foster parents, it's mentors, it's other adult caregivers. All of our families are a broader group of people that we want to make sure that we're being inclusive of. When we talk about empowerment, this is really critical to us as well because we want to come not from a deficit mindset of things that people don't have or can't do, but instead that we're thinking about this in terms of all families have assets. How do we help build on the assets that they have, honor that, and continue to see them as partners in the work that we're doing, as opposed to people that we need to enable or do for. And then in community, we want to make sure that when we talk about community, this is our neighbors and our partners, the partners in the areas of social services, city and county government, as well as our private, public, and nonprofit groups. We want to see that people in our community are experts that we can go to, that we can rely on to help build a collective focus on the assets in the richer community so that we can make sure that all of our community members are coming together for the success of our students. So these are some questions. We always begin with these kind of essential questions about what do we want, what do we mean? And these are things that as a board, you have to help us kind of think through and grapple with. We don't have all of the solutions. We want to bring to you some a blueprint, if you will, in terms of where we want to go, but we need to hear from you as well. In fact, when we were visiting schools on the very first day, Vice President Trujillo said something about we need to know who all of our community members are, and we need to make sure that all of our community members are engaged. So when we talk about what do we value with family and community, how do we value them? Do we value them as sources of knowledge, as experts in helping to raise their children? Or do we see them as volunteers? Do we see them as contributors? How do we see them and how do we value that? When we think about how do we count engagement, if our value of families and community in helping to provide and achieving our stated goals, if our value is that we see them as volunteers, then we measure that, we count that differently than if we see them as people who are knowledge experts and resources for our students. And then we have to think about the ways in which we create environments that encourage diverse groups of families. So part of this is really thinking through how do we identify all of the different community groups, because the Garfield community is different than the Coronado community. But even in the Garfield community, we can't assume that it's all one group. There are lots of different communities within that. How do we identify them? And how do we find out what their wants, their dreams, and the assets are that they bring to this opportunity? And then finally, how will we measure this? In what ways will we measure the impact of this? And this is where we have to think about what do we want to see? If we hit this goal, what will be different because we hit this goal? And that's part of the work that we're going to embark on. So now I want to talk a little bit about research. These are 3 key research reports and studies that we use in thinking about the ways that we talk about family and community engagement. The first is the Roadmap Project, and this was a project that was done in the greater Seattle area. It's from the University of Washington, and it's Ishimaru and Blott. They did case studies in a variety of different communities, and part of the work that they were doing was to understand how did districts bring together diverse groups of communities and help them to see themselves as partners in education. And so what they found was that the schools had to spend a lot of time, not only in understanding who their communities were, they did what they called community scans, and that's where they went out and they found who are all the different partners in our communities and how do we get them engaged. But then they also took time to say, okay, so now that we know you're one of our partners, what do you want? What do you want to bring to this partnership? And they invested in building that kind of a collaborative approach to let's solve problems together. One of the examples is a school that was having a very high discipline problem with a group of students. They went to that community and said, what do we do? What are we not doing so that your students aren't always being disciplined? How do we do something differently? And together, they developed a process for different ways to think about the ways in which those students were disciplined, but also ways to help the families understand what's the expectation in schools and how do we help our students to be successful. So it became a joint project to work together on that. When we talk about the work of Joyce Epstein out of Johns Hopkins University, she reminds us that we often think about community and family engagement in ways that are very traditional and that rely on norms that we have from a long time ago that may no longer fit a modern community. And she says, when we think about engagement in that way, we inadvertently close doors for families to feel welcomed, invited, or included in the work that we do. So she reminds us that we have to think about community engagement and family engagement in a spectrum. Some of us have the means that we can contribute to a school fundraiser, or we might serve on a PTA board, or we might volunteer in a classroom. Others of us don't have those means, but we get our students to school every day. We make sure our students come to school with the materials that they need. We call our teachers when we have questions. We ask our children about the work that they're doing and make sure that they're happy with what's happening at school. That's a form of engagement that we can't negate. It doesn't mean that it's the only form that those families will be able to provide, but if we negate it right away, we never give them an opportunity for something different. And then finally, Karen Mapp at Harvard talks about how you build dual capacity. So that she talks about the fact that if you look at all of these different components, you actually have an opportunity to build the capacity of the school system to serve students better, and the capacity of families to serve, and the community to serve our students better. So it really becomes a wraparound approach to asset building that strengthens everything that we're working toward. And this is why I said at the very beginning, if we don't hit that goal, it's harder for us to hit all of our other strategic goals. So knowing that, it's time for change. And so you think about that commercial, this is not your father's Oldsmobile. Well, it's time for us to get out of the Oldsmobile and to think about where we want to go in the future. And so I'm going to ask Linda to talk a little bit, Ms. Jeffries, to talk a little bit about the work that we're doing currently and where she sees our communication strategies going next.
So we know that family and community engagement begins with building those positive relationships with our stakeholders. In addition to building those positive relationships, it also deals with how we communicate with our families. We know that communication is extremely important. It's especially coming off of a pandemic year and making sure that we are still connected with our families and our community. So I want to just take just a couple of minutes and just review our communication strategies that we use with our families and community. So first of all, we have our district and our school websites. We update the information regularly. Parents know to go to our updates page and our news announcements for the most current information happening within our schools in our district. We also have social media platforms. We've got Facebook and Instagram for both the district as well as 7 of our schools now. And in addition, we are getting ready to launch a new platform, Nextdoor social media app. And so for those of you who might not be familiar with Nextdoor, Nextdoor is somewhat like Facebook, but only it connects us with communities and the people living within the community. So it certainly could be our parents, but it also could be those residents who might not have kids in our schools. So I'm really excited to be able to communicate using a social media app to get our messaging and marketing out to our community members. So you might recall I've talked a lot about Peach Jar, and Peach Jar is our online digital flyer distribution. You can find the Peach Jar link on our district and school websites, and it's a way for our schools and the district to share flyers with our families and community, but it's also a way for us to be able to promote our community organizations and our nonprofit organizations and the services that they provide to our students. We have our in-touch notification system, and we are able to communicate with our families through telephone auto dialer or robocalls, through emails and text messages. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in the next few minutes. But what we're finding, recent results on a survey that we just did with families, the 2 main ways that parents want to be communicated with, according to the survey's results, are telephone and text messaging. And so we're really proud that we have this system and that we're able to communicate with our families in the modes that they most appreciate. So we also do community forums. We've got our school marquees where we are able to put short messages up for our parents or our families and community members. We do mailers. We're reaching about 36,000 residences within the school district boundaries. We have the community relations email and also our helpline for members who need assistance, whether they're community members or whether they're families. They can call or email and have direct access to administrators here at the district office. We have our community communications where our community members and staff have the ability to communicate directly with the board through community comments prior to our regular board meetings. We also have our centralized enrollment clerks who are bilingual staff, and then our main receptionists who also assist in providing that front line communication assistance for our families. And then when we look at the school modes of communication, we have a number of different avenues that our schools are using through newsletters, our notification system as well for their site-specific community events. Some of our schools do home visits. We have classroom email trees, Remind 101. We have the Zoom meetings, virtual community forums, coffees with the principal, Peach Jar also on a school level basis, social media for 7 of our sites. And then from the teacher level, our teachers are using both Class Dojo and Google Classroom to also communicate the classroom happenings with our families. And so I'm very excited. You know, we've talked a little bit about Hanover Research. We're partnering with Hanover Research to conduct surveys and research on our school district. And so we will be launching a climate survey in September, where we will be asking for feedback from our families, our staff, our students, and our community members to get an idea and to get their perceptions on what they think about Phoenix #1. And so some of the areas that the survey will cover deals with family, staff, students, getting information from our stakeholders on school climate and school safety. You know, what does the physical environment of our campuses look like? What's the instructional climate like? What do parents or families think about positive relationships and customer service amongst our staff? We'll also have receive information specifically on the school and district leadership and our personnel, our communication. How do our families want us to communicate with them? And then also we want to know, how do they rate the quality of education received both at the state level, but also here in Phoenix #1. So we're really excited to launch this and be able to provide some real valuable data in the coming months of really where our families sit and where they want to be communicated with and how we can continue our family and community engagement with them. And then one other survey that we just recently launched was a community input survey where we were gathering information to be able to submit the ESSER grant. And so specific questions dealt with technology in the homes, what would help families help their children be more successful in school, how do they feel about our safety measures, any ideas that they have for improving achievement. And so we were able to gather some very specific data, and Dr. Gonzalez is now going to talk a little bit more about the findings and continue our family engagement conversation.
So you may remember that when you went to open houses, you saw this QR code, and if you've been on our campuses lately, you've seen them on classroom doors. We're excited about this technology because it's a quick and easy way for us to respond. And I'm going to go back really quickly to show you no, I'm not. The questions that we had prior were the questions that we wanted, that we have to ask those questions as part of our feedback to apply for ESSER. So it became a kind of a cumbersome process. Initially, we thought we would be able to have facilitate groups where parents would be able to come in, family members, and we'd sit down and we'd have a conversation. With our mitigation procedures and having to pivot to having our open houses outside or, in quick small group bursts, we had to come up with a different way to do it. Fortunately, our great technology and Mr. Magan from MIS did a beautiful job of putting together a survey, putting together the QR codes, and getting information for us very quickly. So we were able to do this, and our teachers, okay, now what am I doing? So we were able to get that out to families, and that's the first phase. We figured in the first phase, we were going to be able to get open house surveys. You typically get about 5% of families responding. We got closer to 10% of our families responding. So we know a next phase is using our class dojo and having our teachers put information out. But I also want to highlight this because we have a family engagement manager at Garfield who took this on, and she went above and beyond what we were expecting and was able to get over 50% of families to respond to her survey. And so I want to introduce Ms. Erica Mendoza. And this speaks to what a powerful person like Erica can do on a campus to help get our community voices heard and recognized. So we wanted to highlight that, but I keep pressing the wrong button. There. We wanted to highlight where we are in terms of, no, I can't use that because I'll walk away. And then you won't be able to hear me. So we wanted to make sure that you saw what some of our feedback is. So we saw that 38% of our families, and this data, by the way, is changing daily because the surveying is still live, but we saw that 38% of our families were requesting a family resource center. 40% were looking for more family resources. 55% were requesting more after-school programs. And we saw that 39% requested more summer programming. Additionally, and this is a credit to decisions that our board members have made in the past, and most recently, 84% of our families identified mask wearing as the #1 priority for keeping their kids safe at school. 80% want more laptops at home, and we're working on that. And the parents, as Ms. Jeffries pointed out, 78% identified text as the best way to communicate with them. 72% said that they would prefer to have a phone call. So phone and text are really important ways to connect with our families. Oh. Okay, I'm not going to touch it. So some of the things that came out of this were frequent two-way communication from teachers and schools. They get a lot of communication from the district, but what our parents and our community really want are those back-to-back conversations, that back and forth with their teachers and with their schools. And again, this was in calls and in texts, not in emails. They want to have ongoing communication. They also want to see more partnerships with schools and families. So you think back to having somebody like Erica on your campus to help build those partnerships, because Erica has the time and the energy to invest in working directly with the families in her school to make sure that their voices are heard and that they're working closely to figure out what are the ways that we enrich the opportunities in our school. They wanted more individualized teaching and acceleration, more homework help, and support for families to learn more, to send materials home in multiple languages, and to build community with their families. So those were outcomes from this first round of surveying. So we expect that we're going to get even more input when the teachers are sending out the class dojo versions of the survey. And then Ms. Jeffries will also have on our website and a robocall out to our other neighbors and community members. What would you like to see in our schools in response to that ESSER grant? We'll get more feedback as well. So now, resources that help to support our work. I highlighted all of these because they have specific provisions that have to focus on family and engagement. So Title I requires that we have a set aside amount for family engagement that improves student achievement. Title VI provides specific focus with a set aside that's dedicated to our American Indian families. McKinney-Vento has a set aside amount that's required for us to work with our housing, our students experiencing houselessness and students who are in transition. And then we have child care stabilization grants that give us opportunities to provide birth to 5-year-old preschool programs. And then ESSER 3 is the grant funding that we're putting into place right now that will help us support our families as we rebound from the COVID pandemic. And I want to highlight really quickly some of our staff from federal programs who helped to make all of this happen. Sarah Sims is one of the driving forces behind this, particularly with McKinney-Vento and Title VI and Johnson O'Malley. She's not able to be here tonight. She's attending a family's wedding. But we do have Nadine Gofina and our director, Sherry Z, who helped to make sure that all of these programs come together for us. And then because of the work that you did last spring in identifying that this was a focus area, you approved a family engagement and education coordinator at the district level. And I'm really happy to say we were able to find somebody who's really outstanding, who lives in our community and is very excited about this. She just started yesterday, Paloma Orozco. She has already started thinking about a lot of different ideas and ways that she's going to work. But so what you can see from this, Paloma's work will help to guide and support the work of our family liaisons on our campuses. And I know that there was a question about how many of our campuses have somebody on their campus like an Erica. So Garfield and Shaw both have somebody like Erica, and their funding goes through a separate grant. That's not necessarily funded through Title I, it's funded through ESSER or through their garden grants they have. Edison, Kenilworth, Lowell, and Hurd all have family liaisons on board right now, and we have 9 positions still to be filled. But because of what you did, we have the ability to now have positions at every one of our school sites. So this drives this, and you'll see that the last column is for our Family Resource Center. And this is actually part of what we see as a dream for our district. And I used this quote from Harriet Tubman, "Every great dream begins with a dreamer," because I think it has many connotations that are apropos for our community. And because I think this is a great opportunity for us to dream. ESSER funding gives us an opportunity to do something we haven't been able to do because we didn't have the capital to be able to do that. With this current round of ESSER funding, we have an opportunity to build an infrastructure that not only supports what happens at the school sites, but allows us to create an infrastructure and a welcoming environment for families to come to Phoenix #1, one-stop shopping in terms of getting needs met, in terms of being able to help us move into the next areas. These are some of the ideas that our staff have been thinking about, and that when we talk to other neighbors that have similar centers, and when we look at the research, it can become a welcome center for families that are coming into the area. Dedicated support staff can help provide individualized assistance in family workshops and classes for families, everything from basic computer training to building a job resume. We can work with language supports for family members as well as for students and before and after school programs. We can also provide newcomer and refugee supports. We can provide basic needs assistance in connecting them with community volunteers and community social services with clothing, food boxes, mental health and physical health, counseling, vision screening, our Smile dental clubs, vaccine testing. You can just see all the sorts of opportunities that we can have through a dedicated center. This can also be a one-stop enrollment shop so that we can free up our office managers to be welcoming greeters and embracers of people coming onto campus as soon as people can go beyond the glass partitions. But being able to be that friendly face that's welcoming instead of having to be the people who are going through the mountains of paperwork, we can have dedicated staff working on that there. We can also have tutoring and mentoring, as I mentioned, and then of course the early childhood, and with the Childhood Stabilization Grant, opportunities to provide programs for birth to 5 children as well. So as we think about this opportunity, we feel like we need to be moving quickly because we have this opportunity in front of us. So here's a potential timeline. Of course, nothing is set in stone yet. But the first part is really conducting that community scan. So when Ms. Jeffries talked about the Hanover research study that will be going on in the community, that's one aspect of that. But Paloma will be able to be working in our community, building bridges with some of our different partners and meeting our neighbors to understand what does our community want and need, going back to that roadmap project. Then taking time in that same process to learn from others, not only learning from the people within our community, but who's doing this well? How do we learn from people who have examples already? What works well and what do we want to replicate? And what are things that they wish they had that we can put into our program? Then in October, we want to be able to identify a potential space. That's going to require a lot of understanding of what's available, what's the cost, what's the, how do we sustain it over time? And then to engage our partners, then we begin developing, once we've identified who our partners are, developing the program together. And then finding our staff and volunteer models. We don't want this to be a staff heavy place, but we do want it to be, we want volunteers to be able to be present. The staff who are there, we should probably have social workers, a family engagement coordinator, nurses, things like that, people who can be there on a regular basis, but we can also find opportunities for staff from our schools to help populate the center so that we're not having to extend our staffing circumstances. Then we want to begin building, remodeling, refreshing, whatever it is that we need to do based on the site that we've identified. And the goal would be that by April, as part of our 150-year celebration, we're able to say, Phoenix #1 has the center dedicated to our community and ready to take us into the next 150 years. And that concludes to answer any questions you may have now.
Well, thank you so much for the presentation to both Ms. Jeffries and Ms. Gonzalez. So if my understanding this correctly is that we are going to identify a space and we have the funding to do this?
We can put funding into our ESSER grant. So we don't know what the funding level will be. We have to wait until it's actually approved to be able to do that. But we do have, through all of those resources that I identified, and in addition to those, we also have potential resources for Title II, Title III, Title IV. Those are all different funding sources. Those would help provide programming and staff, but ESSER could help us provide a space. And so what does that look like? That's part of what we have to identify and to make sure that it can fit within the confines of the grant.
Thank you for that clarification. I do have some recommendations, and I'm so thankful that we have filled the position of the Family Engagement and Education Coordinator. So thank you so much and welcome. It's much needed. And I think what I would really like to see from the surveys is every school stand alone and have identified what that plan for that school looks like.
So what's really great about the survey that Mr. McGon built, and as we take the second step that comes class by class, it actually breaks down by school, by student, and it develops hot maps, if you will, of what are the needs that they have. So we'll be able to see district-wide what are common needs, but we'll also be able to see Shaw needs this, Garfield needs this, Lowell needs this. And we can even break it down by grade level and by which community group is asking for it. So it's a really great survey tool that he's built for us.
Great, thank you. And then for the community side, how were you planning to get the community surveys out to the stakeholders? I'm just trying to understand, how would a community member, let's say, for example, myself, who doesn't have kids in the district, how would I be engaged to fill out this survey?
So we will certainly post the survey on our website. We'll reach out to our community partners. We'll reach out to neighborhood associations. We can reach out through the Nextdoor app, certainly word of mouth. So all of you have neighbors and have connections. So we're going to really rely on having those verbal conversations and driving our community members to the website where they can then have a link to complete the survey.
And is that something that we've done in the past? Is that a successful method?
I can't speak to what we've done in the past. According to Hanover Research, they do a lot of surveys. So this is the recommended survey methodology that they recommend. Certainly, we can post notices in the public library and other frequented locations. Certainly, I'd love the opportunity to talk a little bit more with you and maybe get some additional ideas of how we can engage our community to ensure that we hear their voices as well.
Yeah, because I'm just trying to think of, myself, a millennial. There's no way I was going to ever engage with the school district if I was not interested in running for a school board. So what are the other ways? Because that is the community input that we do want,
Right.
is to hear from all our stakeholders. So yeah, I would recommend, maybe posting the surveys at coffee shops. I like the QR codes,
Absolutely.
posting them in places where people hang out in.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I think lastly, I do have some reservations about Nextdoor. I'm a little concerned about the feedback that we're gonna get and the type of engagement that we're gonna get. I just want you to be prepared for that in terms of I feel that people will be responsive and want to help, but you have to identify where they could potentially help. So I'll just give you that piece of advice.
Thank
And
you.
then just, personally speaking, Nextdoor is just an app used for people to complain about everything in their neighborhood. So I'll just leave it at that. That's how I've seen it been used here locally, but that's all I have. For you.
And I will share the specific platform that we're on. It is specifically designed for school districts. And so it certainly is going to be a two-way engagement, but it is designed specifically for school districts. Charter schools are not able to tap into this particular model. So I certainly understand your concerns about the two-way communication and the platform and how it's maybe used in the community. I think one thing that's nice about this is that, we can certainly look at it for a year. If we find that it's not successful or that it's used in a manner in which we wouldn't want to participate or be a part of, we're on a year-to-year contract with that. And so we can certainly cancel that contract at any time.
Okay. And then lastly, from our community, from our business partners, I think maybe if we could also get some raffle and donations for incentives for surveys and other type of engagement
Good idea.
to happen. I think that would also promote small businesses and, families going to small businesses here locally. And it would be a good way to engage with our business partners.
Absolutely. That's a great idea. Thank you.
Jeffries, Carmen Trujillo here. I'm wondering what the Nextdoor app looks like in terms of multiple languages, Spanish specifically. What does that look like for us?
So, Ms. Trujillo, that we're still looking at the development of it. So much like what we do with our Facebook ads, we could certainly post in English and in Spanish. And there might even be an avenue, but I'll need to just double check and get back with you. There might be an avenue where it's already translated, but if not, just as we post all of our messages in English and Spanish, we would do that as well through Nextdoor.
Oh, perfect. That is a humongous concern of mine. So I'm a little concerned we haven't started that conversation. As far as having 7 schools with social media, I thought we were going to move to all the schools.
That was something that we were talking about, but looking at the budget and the expense for adding all of our schools, it was a conversation that we decided to keep specifically with our 6 schools. We did add the iAcademy because of the virtual learning, and that was probably a great way to communicate with parents. So we're going to look at this for 1 more year and then determine if that's something that we want to have that additional expense, or if we want to look at other ways that we might be able to do some services in-house.
So would that just be a no-go for all the other schools, or would that be like the schools that don't have social media? Are they able to do their own? Just to have like a platform for parents and stuff like that, or are we not allowing that?
At this time, social media is handled through the district and through the marketing communications. And so we would want to be sure that all of the social media, if we decide to add additional schools, that that's something that we want coming through the district office and not having our schools go out and create their own social media accounts.
I'm really bummed to hear that. So that's all the questions that I have right now. And are there any other questions?
Yeah, I think, well, a comment first is this is a beautiful, wonderful idea. Thank you for presenting it to us. I'm excited hearing about it. And I want to act quick to plant the seed wherever we're trying to occupy, find a space, identify a space, and then grow what we want to grow. Just some again, some advice or things to think about is when engaging partners, which I'm sure you're thinking about, is engaging local partners, local organizations and nonprofits. And then to Board Member Bueno's point, I know like tying this to the Pathways to Success initiative will go a long way in who are hiring and accepting to do this work, and possibly dispense those surveys, going door to door, knocking on those doors to families to fill out those surveys too. That's the level I want to go to get that information filled out too.
Thank you. That's a wonderful idea.
And just really quickly, in terms of this space, is just in this meeting, we talked about access to food, and just here in Phoenix in general is just an environmental component. You talked about the school climate. I would love to see somewhere in this space something that is focused on the environmental component. Being in a food desert, being in a heat island, needing access to more green spaces is something that I know a center like this could provide too.
I love those ideas. Thank you.
Alicia, being here. I want to thank you for this. I'm so excited and I can see how passionate you are. I'm so excited that Miss Paloma
Orozco
is here. My only thought, and I'm sure it will be part of the conversation, is surrounding transportation and just making sure that part of our survey, we do find out how many families actually have access to transportation. I know that for events and things, I'm sure we would do busing or whatever we needed to do, but for everyday access, I just want to make sure that it is.
That is a great point. We do want to make sure it's on a major bus line in our community and that it's easily accessed. Thank you.
And not only that, but if we're talking about a major bus line, then I want to talk about making sure that we have bus passes available to those families as well.
And that's one of those places where the resources that I showed before will be instrumental in being able to help provide that. So that's great thinking. Thank you.
I think my last recommendation would be for us to clean up the Google Maps for each school. There's some reviews that are really old, so maybe if we can ask for those to be removed and we could add up-to-date photos, I think that'll help with just in general marketing the school district. So if you could please work on that.
And even just double check that all of the addresses go to the actual school. That hasn't been an issue, I think, since, no, actually it was when I was doing the chalk drawings. It took me to, I don't know, somewhere. And then Emerson Courts and Emerson are, yeah, so just double check that in our, whoever's, I'm not even sure that that's your job, I'm sorry, but whoever's responsible for that.
That's definitely something we can look into.
Last question. So, or for me, I mean, so this idea for the community center that we kind of ended on, what survey did that come from?
That came from the first round of the ESSER survey, that was one of the high priority areas that families indicated.
Okay. I wasn't sure
And I- oh, go
between the
ahead.
difference.
No, I'm sorry. Remind me, so I did do the survey, but now I can't, and I've been asked to do it several times to the point where it is a competition in my son's classroom, which doesn't make sense, by the way, because I thought it was supposed to be anonymous. So, anyway,
The competition is for the school that gets the most, it's not for by parent, but by school that gets the most
oh, the school with the most.
responses.
Okay,
Yeah.
it said the class with, what is the school with the most? Yeah, I just need to know what I'm working for here.
They will probably get balloons delivered or something kind of kooky.
I'm gonna
Nothing.
need like popsicles or something.
Yeah,
Okay.
otter pops.
Sorry, was Family Resource Center, was that like a multiple choice and that was already an option or a write-in? I guess?
So it is one of the multiple choice options, but then when you look at the write-in options, it's something that comes up frequently, one of the most frequent.
Okay, I think it's
write-ins.
important to just know that Family
Yes.
Resource Center was written in the survey, not just a.
God, and that
Right.
raises a good point because for me, because as I'm listening and going over this in my head, that's kind of what I was wondering, or really what's the word I want to use, the qualitative stuff that we grabbed from there, like what wording was used, because when I do hear, sorry, my brain's a little crazy looking at these pages, but I think the resources I'm talking about where it says just all the resource page, when I hear all that, it takes me away from I guess the pros of having a family resource center. So if we could even work on the wording there where it's more wellness based and more familial, and it's not so much like how we were talking about having a deficit where it's conveyed in a way that's empowering, as opposed to like in my head, the way I experience it, it's a bit dismissive, and it doesn't make me feel good as a person who has relied on services like that. There's some stuff that goes with it for me. So if I feel like that, I'm sure there's other families that feel like that. So I took the survey myself and I was thinking like, dang, what words did I use and what did I see? So thank you
So
for bringing me
these
to that
are,
point.
I put back up for us, this is the anecdotal qualitative piece that the people talked about. So you notice the things that came up most frequently were the communication, the partnerships with schools and families, individualized teaching acceleration, supporting families to learn more. Those are direct quotes from the surveys that are the qualitative aspect, and then build community with families. And so you'll notice, because I think you're absolutely right, when we talk about what we want to call it, we don't want to call it a resource center. We want to call it a family and community empowerment center, because we do think that connotes a different sense of what the center is really about. And realize it goes back to the research that we talked about earlier on.
Thank you both very much for pulling this together with that little bit of time that we had since the survey went out.
Well, I think we were all very excited when we started to see the feedback coming in, and people rallied around and pulled together great ideas and put this together, because there's a lot of passion and a desire to bring something like this to our students.
Any other comments, anybody?
Just a big thank you. Thank you very much. That was great information.
All right, just trying to get my head back looking at our agenda, we'll move on to item B1, board reports and requests. So I would like to begin and share a report, I guess, on my site visits that we went on this week and the week prior. I visited, along with board member Ms. Bueno, some of our open houses. So I got to see some of our schools informally as more of an observer, just kind of seeing how our schools filled up on Meet the Teacher Night. And that was really, I think, a great turnout. The families looked super excited to be there. I saw some parents registering the very same night and having good conversations with our principal about bringing their kids the next morning. So it was great to see our principals getting creative as far as making sure masks were worn. And I'm assuming getting that survey out. I got to see Dr. Weeks at one of them as well. So they had raffles going. I know Kenilworth has their fashion show, but it was really good to see the team effort going on through such a troublesome time, I guess, during the pandemic. So I'm hoping that, I can invite other board members to give feedback on what they saw out there as well.
Thank you. I'd like to echo what Mr. Trujillo just mentioned about everybody working together to really implement, deploy our mitigation strategies. At my site visits, I was able to visit Dunbar, Edison, Lowell, and Garfield. And it was such a joy seeing all our students in their desks, not even worried about the masks. They were all responsible, and I was so proud of them because they're showing more responsibility than half the state is at such a young age. So it was very heartwarming just to see the joy of our students being in a physical location all together, and the adoration that they have for their teachers is just so lovely to see. And I really want to thank all our staff for making this year such a great success already. And I look forward to helping our staff, teachers, families, and communities continue to make it through the rest of this year.
I also got to go on some site visits and some open houses. And I am just so grateful to have been able to visit so many of our schools and chat with our principals, staff, and students. Dr. Gonzalez and I met a little girl who was registering for preschool at Garfield, and they asked her, "What's your name?" I'm a superhero. It's the best part of my day. I saw masks everywhere, lots of learning happening, beautiful murals and gardens. I even got to hold a chicken at Garfield. It's wonderful. And I do want to recognize for any of our staff listening how much I appreciate the work that you're doing, especially this year, and the families that may be listening. Thank you for trusting us with your children. And then I also want to recognize my fellow board members and the work that we have done to ensure that our kinder through fourth grade students had access to an online school this year, and to ensure that our students are safe and wearing masks. I appreciate you all so much.
Thank you, Dr. Vink. That did remind me about the online school. So I wasn't able to participate in the informational webinars, but getting to see Mr. Fuentes kind of lay out what goes on and what the classrooms have going on, I was really taken aback. Everything was really organized. It was like everywhere I went really was like a well-oiled machine. And I think that is it's a good tone to set for the whole rest of the year, no matter how it goes. But between the students, teachers, principals, the board, Dr. Weeks, parents even, it was just a really warm time to kind of just be around the community and observe and just watch how it goes, as opposed to be there, you know, observing as a decision maker. I did get lost kind of just being in my community, and that is, I like organic things like that. So thank you for the reminder, Dr. King.
Madam Chair, did you want board requests now too as well? Okay, I do have a few requests. My first request is for weekly data regarding our cases and quarantine, COVID cases at each of our sites. How many active cases and how many students quarantined? Students and staff. My second request is an update on how distance learning is happening for students who are quarantined. Next request, an update on staffing for buses, peer, and substitutes for quarantined staff. Next request, update on implementation of pooled testing and mobile clinics. That's all.
Any other board reports or requests? Hearing none, we'll move on to B2, future agenda items for future meetings.
I have one for August 26th, I believe is when we meet next. For the board to look at a resolution to reiterate our 2017 stance. And this time it would be a resolution. I want to put that out there because it is we have a while to get there, so I want to put that out there so you can see it coming.
You mean for Giblet, right?
Or, sorry, yes, that should. It's 9 o'clock. I'm thinking about class tomorrow. For Giblet, yes, Giblet.
Mr. Creo, did you want us to prepare a draft, send it to board members for review and feedback?
Yeah, yeah, please.
We'll do that.
And then I'll just based on the information here, I would like to send a draft to you and then can combine them or go with your draft. So I just want to send something over to you too. Okay,
Sure.
afterwards.
And then I just have one future agenda item. And I'm not sure how it would be written, but I would like to circle back to the social media for all schools.
As far as maybe an update, what,
A receive and discuss of potentially adding that social media for all schools
thank you.
again.
Would you like a budget analysis, a cost analysis of the research that's been conducted?
Sure, you can.
Or is it really more focused on kind of the functionality, the practicality?
All of it. I want to know whether we should be doing it from a marketing standpoint, a budget standpoint, why we aren't doing it if we should be doing it, and how we do it if we need to be doing it.
Okay, let me give you a call and we can get some of the details ironed
Okay.
out. Mhm.
I was also thinking, how am I going to word that? But yeah, absolutely a clear picture of what that looks like for our community, for our students, and for those schools as far as attracting enrollment. Like, my mind just thinks about so many of those things. So thank you.
Yeah,
Any
we can
other-
begin to pull some data together. We can also begin to take a look at some of the social media reports. Again, because we just looked at them not too long ago. But we can take another look at those.
Any other future, any other agenda items? All right, hearing none. Can move on to adjourning. Do I have a motion to adjourn our meeting this evening?
Alicia Vink, so moved.
Do I have a second?
Reggie Carrillo, I second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay. Having 4 in favor, the motion passes and we will adjourn the meeting at 9:13 this evening. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.